Howdy, folks. This video is from a show I recently did on Cameron Bertuzzi's channel, Capturing Christianity. If you like it, do all the YouTube things to let YouTube know to show the video to others. Be sure to like, comment, and share the video. And I am trying to grow my channel, so be sure and subscribe and hit the bell notification. Don't forget to check out Capturing Christianity and support the work that Cameron is doing there. Hope you enjoy this.
So Congress recently held a hearing on UAPs, and they interviewed 4 different people. One of them was a retired Navy admiral. The other one, Luis Elizondo. Hope I'm saying that correctly. He was the director of the now defunct Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Michael Schellenberger, who is a journalist, and then Michael Gold, who is a NASA. He was a former associate administrator of space policy and partnerships, and a member of the organization's independent UAP study team. And they testified before Congress, making some really bold claims about UAPs and actually the source, the origin of these UAPs, what they think these actually are. That's the topic for us today in this live stream. And joining me, I've got Jimmy Akin, none other than Jimmy Akin, who he's got, if you don't know this about Jimmy, you need to know this. He's got this amazing podcast called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where he talks about all sorts of different things. One of those topics that he discusses on his podcast is the whole UAP, alien, ETI, extraterrestrial phenomena that has been reported. Thousands and thousands of these reports are coming in, and now we're getting reports. I guess this isn't anything new. This is stuff that's been going on for a long time, but we're getting these reports from actual government officials. And so that's the topic for us today. We're going to be looking at this congressional hearing. I've got several different clips lined up. We're going to hear what these men are having to say, and then we're going to get some commentary from Jimmy on this. So this stream, I think, is going to be very valuable for you guys. If you want a sort of down-to-earth reaction to this congressional hearing, no pun intended, you're going to get that in this video if you watch the whole thing. And also, you don't need to watch the whole congressional hearing. If you watch this video, you're going to get a sort of representative sampling of that. So this is also going to serve as like a resource for you if you'd rather watch something like this as opposed to the congressional hearing itself. But with all of that said, Jimmy, it's great to have you back on Capturing Christianity. It's actually been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, but always happy to be back and happy to be talking about this very interesting subject. Incidentally, it was the House hearing that got most of the press this week, but there was also a Senate hearing it was much briefer. It was just like 30 minutes, and it only had one interviewee. But if you want, I'm prepared to talk about that one some too, because I thought it was very interesting as well.
And that one is the AARO. Is that the right acronym?
Yes.
AARO program?
Right. AARO or AARO stands for All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And so they've been tasked with resolving anomalies. And the Senate had the current head of AARO as their witness. They didn't have official representatives of AARO at the House hearing, which is the one we've got the video clips of, but they certainly talked about it a lot.
Yeah, and that one, I know that pretty much anything that gets discussed in this entire area, there's all sorts of ways that you can interpret it. There could be some sort of cover up on either side. There's disinformation that gets thrown out there, and so it's hard to know what to trust and what is a good inference to make in this area. And that's one of the reasons why we're covering this topic. Actually, I should also mention why is a Christian channel talking about this? Well, there's all sorts of overlaps in the ways that Christians view evidence, and also the evidence for the truth of Christianity. Is there any evidence that conflicts with the truth of Christianity? There actually are a number of Christians that think that if we were to find evidence for the existence of extraterrestrials or non-human intelligence, then that this would serve as evidence against the truth of Christianity. I was in fact talking with a philosophy friend of mine, and he was basically outlining the same thought, that he thinks that this would actually undermine a lot of our intuitions about the truth of Christianity. In particular, he was saying that, if we've got this other alien race, what do we do about are they fallen? Are they not fallen? It seems to complicate the picture in ways that, if it's just humans in this universe, that seems to be a much simpler way of viewing things, especially in light of what we know from the truths of Christianity. And so anyways, that's why we're talking about this subject. There's all sorts of overlaps in epistemology and in evidence, and whether or not this actually conflicts with our belief as Christians. And so that's the biggest reason why we're talking about this today. Jimmy, any thoughts on that before we get started?
Well, I think it's also legitimate for Christians to just interact with, the world that God has made and be curious. And if there is extraterrestrial intelligence, that's cool, and it's something Christians ought to know about. It's something Christians ought to give some thought to, so that if it's ever discovered, we know how to think about it. Personally, I agree that it's simpler if it's just humans in this universe, but I fundamentally disagree with your friend's idea that this would in any way undermine Christianity if it turned out there's more than humans in the universe. I mean, I can think of 2 cases already where we've had discoveries like this. Whenever I contemplate a possible discovery or shift in society, I think historically, has anything like this happened before? And well, we know humans aren't the only intelligent creatures because God made angels. And so are there questions about angels like, I wonder if they're fallen? Did Jesus redeem them? Can they be saved? Well, we know the answers to those questions. And that didn't undermine Christianity. That's even part of the Bible. And then after the Bible, we've already discovered a new world. In fact, you and I are living in the new world. Back before 1492, all people knew about was, Europe and the Middle East and Asia and Africa. And then it turns out, there's a whole new world on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. And guess what? It's filled up with people too. And there were questions about, well, so how do the Native Americans relate to us? Are they children of Adam? There was a debate about that. Are they fallen? Are they lost Hebrews? How do they relate to Jesus? All these questions have been asked before, and they're questions that need to be answered. The answers to the questions are different in the case of angels than they are for Native Americans. Native Americans turn out are fellow human beings, and they're saved exactly the same way and fallen exactly the same way everybody they knew about was. But, just because we discover a new race, it's not a big deal. We've got some questions to answer about it, but it doesn't undermine Christianity.
I think I'm pretty much on your side of this.
By the way, Christianity is true.
By the way. Just in case you guys didn't know that, by the way, Christianity is true. So I wanted to take some super chats that were sent in. These were actually sent in before we even went live, which is amazing. Apollo says, evidence that UAP activity that's specifically extraterrestrial, undiscovered DNA doesn't cut it because it could just be undiscovered species on Earth. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think it depends on the DNA. If it's made out of the same 4 nucleotides that we have in terrestrial DNA, then I'd agree it could just be an undiscovered species from here on Earth. But if you start looking at a DNA strand and instead of A, T, C, and G, it's got a W and an X in there that is not found in any terrestrial life, I would say, no, that's pretty strong prima facie evidence this DNA didn't come from Earth.
All right, let's move on. He's got another super chat. Apollos, again, he sent in 3. So this one, he says, UAPs equals undiscovered Earth stuff, but no evidence of ships from outer space. Plus, alien grass, cows, bacteria don't conflict with humans as image of God. Yeah, so he's bringing up 2 different points here. What he's saying that UAPs are, this is his hypothesis, is that it's just undiscovered human, maybe human activity would be a better way of putting it. And I think this is a completely reasonable hypothesis, right? Because we don't know. I mean, one of the things that often gets said in this context, and I probably should have held this point for a little bit later when we get into the actual video clips. one of the hypotheses that gets floated around a lot is that this is just it's human technology that is just beyond what has been revealed by the government, and I think that's a completely sensible hypothesis.
Well, I agree. It's a hypothesis that needs to be investigated. I think that it depends. I think the plausibility of the hypothesis depends on what the observed characteristics of UAP are, because we have a certain level of technological achievement right now, and it's reasonable to think there will be things that are in development that are currently secret, either here in the United States or in our near competitor nations, that are a little in advance of what's commercially available. But if we see something that's just off the charts different than what we can do, then that would be evidence that it's not just from us or our nation competitor states. So I wouldn't say no evidence. Anytime anyone uses the phrase no evidence, I get hinky, because that's usually an exaggeration. There frequently is.
You said you get hinky?
Some evidence. Yeah, hinky. It's an old-fashioned term. It means suspicious. And
Okay.
if you watch old episodes of
Never
Dragnet, you'll hear Joe Friday talking about people getting hinky.
Hinky. Okay. All right. You're suspicious. All right. Maybe I should put a little Southern twang on that. You're suspicious.
Yeah, well, in any event, claims of no evidence is usually an exaggeration. I always get suspicious when I hear that. But he's certainly right that alien grass or alien cows or alien bacteria wouldn't conflict with the idea of humans being the image of God. I would add, neither would intelligent alien life. That wouldn't conflict with humans being the image of God on Earth either.
All right, so let's get to his last super chat. He says Christian apologetics, Last Supper, Last Supper, aliens equals evidence for intelligent design. I'm not exactly sure what he means by the first part of this super chat, but the second.
Last super chat. Last super chat. I think that's
last super. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. And that's just part of his name, Apollo's Christian Apologetics. That's just part of his name. Okay, so he says, last super chat, aliens equals evidence for intelligent design. Yeah, so if we were to find, ETI aliens, some other planet, would that be? So here's my thought on that. I think that it would actually be evidence for theism because of what we've learned from abiogenesis. Like we know, at least my limited knowledge, we at least know that we don't know how to get life started on this planet. We have maybe some indicators here and there, but we don't actually have a full picture of how it came about. But no matter what, the process by which it happened is a very unlikely process. So if we have that happening in multiple places in the universe, we've got this unlikely process here, this one here, it just increases the improbability that it would all come about by chance. And so I think it does actually raise the probability of something like an intelligent design. It depends on what we mean by intelligent design, because intelligent design is usually meant in the context of evolution as a sort of hypothesis that competes with evolution. But this is talking about how life started as opposed to how life may have evolved. So is it proper to talk about intelligent design in that context? Either way, I think it does provide evidence for theism. But Jimmy, what are your thoughts?
No, I'd agree to the extent that humans or life on Earth is evidence for intelligent design. If we found life somewhere else, we'd fold that into the arguments. The numbers might change a little bit, but I'd say we've already got evidence to the extent that the arguments from design based on life and abiogenesis, which is the emergence of life from non-living matter, to the extent that those arguments work, we already have that evidence, and this would simply put more logs on the fire.
All right, now let's go ahead and turn to the clips now. So this one, we're going to start with a clip from Elizondo. And Elizondo, again, he's Luis Elizondo. And according to him, Luis.
He goes by Lou.
Lou, okay. Well, maybe I don't know him personally, but maybe I'll just call him Lou for the purpose of this show today, or maybe I'll just call him Mr. Elizondo. That might be. I like his last name. These sort of fancy last names, as you can see, I'm a big fan of them. My last name is Bertuzzi. So okay, so let me remind you of who this guy is. Okay, before we watch his opening statement. So he was the director of the now defunct Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. However, according at least to, let me go ahead and pull this up over here. According to Wikipedia, his statements about his Pentagon role with AATIP have been contested by Pentagon officials. So,
yeah, let me say something about that.
Yeah,
so,
please do.
When he went public, he resigned from the Defense Department in 2017, and he released non-classified information to the press, specifically to the New York Times, that brought the whole UAP UFO issue into public prominence again. And the Pentagon did try to obfuscate and claim, well, he wasn't the head of this, and there's been a confusion between the organization you mentioned, ATIP, and a related one named OSAP, which is the Advanced Aerospace Weapons something or other, that was the parent of ATIP. And what he was he worked in OSAP, and then ATIP was kind of an outgrowth of OSAP. So there's been some confusion, and the Defense Department used that to try to obfuscate matters. And they, for a while, even denied that he worked for them. But he has since been vindicated. They've had to admit, yeah, he did work for us. He did do the stuff he claimed. And so even Wikipedia.
So this Wikipedia, this Wikipedia article is it's suffering from
it's suffering from skeptical bias. There are groups of skeptics who, in their view, help, but in other views, sabotage Wikipedia articles to give them a particular slant. And that's happening here.
But this guy, I mean, maybe I'll just ask you the question instead of making a statement about this. Do you find this guy credible? Do you think that Lou Elizondo is a credible person? As I was listening to the congressional hearing, we're going to turn to that in just a second. He was one of the more credible witnesses that I was listening to throughout the course of the hearing. What are your thoughts on his credibility?
I find him credible. Now, one question I always have is, could someone be a disinformation agent? And very credible disinformation agents, if they're successful, they seem credible.
Yes.
But I don't have any reason. I've followed him for several years. I've read his book. I've watched numerous interviews with him. And I find him to actually be pretty cautious in a lot of what he claims. Occasionally, he'll make a claim that, I have questions about, but fundamentally, he comes across as honest and credible.
All right. With that said, let's go ahead and turn to our first clip, which again is from, or I don't know if I've mentioned this already. It's from his opening statement. Okay. Let me actually turn to it now. It's 3609 in this video. If I can scroll over it and get to it. All right. So let's go ahead and listen to at least the first about a minute of his opening statement. We'll just get a sort of general sense of where he's coming from. He claims that UAPs are real, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, and that there's a multi-decade secretive arms race. So let's just listen to this really
opening
quickly.
Statement.
Greetings, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Members Connolly and Garcia, and members of the committee. It is my honor and privilege to testify before you on the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, formerly known as UFOs. On behalf of our brave men and women in uniform and across the intelligence community, as well as my fellow Americans who have awaited this day, thank you for your leadership on this important matter. Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies.
All right, so that's just the little portion that I wanted to get from him on his opening statement. Do you have any thoughts on his opening? Well, first of all, maybe I can ask you this way. Do you think that he is right that there are UAPs, that these UAPs are real? So, putting aside the question, what are they? Do you believe that UAPs are a real phenomena, that the U.S. government is not really sure what it is?
I don't think there's any question that we have evidence, really strong evidence of certain aerial phenomena that display characteristics that are anomalous and that we don't know how to explain. So, yeah, there are UAPs. That's agreed to broadly. If you talk to either the former or the current head of AARO, they're very frank about it. We've got some really interesting stuff we don't know how to explain. So yeah, there are UAPs. In terms of are there elements within the government military industrial complex that know more about them than they have revealed to Congress? That is a separate question. I think the answer is very likely yes. And one of the things that emerged in this hearing is we finally got a name for a program that can be investigated and we can follow up on that allegedly it does exist but has not been reported to Congress. And this is one of I won't give it away yet, but this is one of the things that's been missing. And so I think that's very significant about this hearing.
So one of the other things that he claimed is that we're in possession of these UAP technologies. And again, these are sort of unidentified, which means that we just don't know the source of where they came from. Do you agree? Is that something that you agree with?
Well, I think he's being honest in reporting that because it's what he's been told, but he does not claim, at least he has not publicly claimed, to have seen or touched or handled extraterrestrial spaceships. He doesn't claim that we've got a Tic Tac back in the barn. So he's not an eyewitness to that, but he has been in touch with people who have told him that. And there is an evidential question about, okay, so he may be reporting what he's been told accurately, but are the reports accurate, or could someone have fed him disinformation? And there's also a problem. You may, depending on which clips we play, you may hear people referring to circular reporting, which is where, a small group of people are just circulating a claim amongst themselves. And it seems credible to each person. I got it from Bill got it from Bob got it from Zach got it from Zeke. And it turns out it's just a circular loop of people reporting a rumor that everybody in the group has heard, but there's no way to trace it back to origin and see, is the rumor true or not? So there is a danger of circular reporting here. And what I find significant is, hey, now we got a name, we can check that out. We can find out if this is just circular reporting or not.
And we'll get to that in just a second. But the next thing I want to do is introduce the second person that I found really credible. And maybe it's just because he was very articulate, but his name is Michael Schellenberger. Yes, Michael Schellenberger, which actually reminds me a lot of Schellenberg, the atheist philosopher who's written a lot on the problem of divine hiddenness. Every time I see his name, that's the first person I think of. But Schellenberger, he is a...
This guy is not about hiddenness. He's a journalist, so he's about putting stuff out there.
Yes, and he received a document, which we're about to discuss in just a second, from a what he calls as a credible source. Okay, so let's listen to his opening statement, which starts at about the 42-minute mark. So let me just scoot forward a little bit, and we'll listen to a little portion of his opening statement. And in this portion, he is discussing the sort of non-extraterrestrial, non-alien hypotheses, and that also we have a right to know what UAPs are, no matter what they are. I thought this was just an interesting clip we can talk about just for a little bit.
There are other explanations for UAPs than that they represent a new form of life or non-human life. Current dominant alternative theories, including those put forward by AARO, are that UAPs are some kind of natural phenomena we don't yet understand, like ball lightning.
Okay, so he's referencing AARO again, which is this organization, and I think it's within the Pentagon. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. It's within the military. It has a military website extension, so it's under the Defense Department, which is based in the Pentagon.
Yep. So there you go. He's referencing them, and they also in their we're not going to play any clips from that interview. Not the interview. It was a Senate hearing. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
With the director of that program, and he was basically of the opinion that we haven't verified none of the evidence that they've seen, none of the reports that they're investigating indicate that there are such thing as ETI or extraterrestrials or non-human intelligence, and that's also sparked some outrage. And I was even looking on Reddit just to kind of see what people were saying about this in the the UFO Reddit, because actually some of those subreddits are very skeptical. Like, they have a lot of skeptical people who are sort of providing the rational, reasonable take on these things. And one of the takes in that subreddit was that this guy is just spreading disinformation so that he could, because I mean, that's one of the things. And I think that I actually heard this. Let me go ahead and switch scenes here so we can get ourselves full screen. But one of the things that I was listening to an episode on Joe Rogan with Lou Elizondo. Elizondo, and man, I just lost my train of thought here. Let me see if I can pull it back up.
You were listening to Joe Rogan, and they were talking about.
It's not coming to me. I think it had to do with. Oh man, I've just lost my train of thought. It's so unfortunate when that happens.
Well, don't worry. The thought will come back when it gets hungry.
Maybe we should just continue the clip with Schellenberger, because I think it was going to be like another 20 seconds. But
let me put a couple of things in before we do. The first one is, you do encounter this claim, and if you go to Arrow's website, which is, I believe, aaro.mil, they have a Q&A on the front page, and one of the questions is, are UAPs extraterrestrial? And you click on that, and they make this claim, which you just alluded to, that we haven't found any evidence, or we found no evidence. There's that suspicious phrase to me, that they are extraterrestrial. But they don't mean that there's nothing unexplained here. They acknowledge there is unexplained stuff, and some of it is significantly unexplained. And so to the extent we have something that's unexplained in terms of terrestrial technology that is compatible, here we get into epistemology, that is evidence that's compatible with the extraterrestrial hypothesis. So I wouldn't say we have no evidence, meaning no reason to suspect or believe. We do have reason to suspect. What we don't have, they're using evidence in a stronger sense of the term, meaning proof. And I would agree, we don't have proof that UAP are extraterrestrial. I would say we do have evidence that supports that hypothesis, but it is not evidence in the sense of proof of that hypothesis. And frankly, I have to be a little sympathetic with them. Even though I would use the term evidence differently, you have to think in terms of what's the public reaction going to be. If they were to come out and say we have evidence of extraterrestrial intervention on Earth, people would glom onto that and assume that's true, and it hadn't been proven yet. So I think they're kind of playing a fairly delicate word game, and I understand why they're doing it, but it doesn't mean what a skeptic would want it to mean, that we have nothing even suggestive of extraterrestrial intelligence. The second thing I wanted to mention is he just named one.
By the way, you just reminded me of the point that I wanted to make. So
go ahead.
Oh, okay. Are you going to be able to remember your second point before?
My thoughts are all hungry. I'll have them here when I need them.
Okay, good. So they were discussing why, because he had to submit the documents that he had to submit. I think it was like a page report or something like that. He said he submitted it to the Pentagon, and he had to get approval to be able to speak about this stuff at all. And it took like a year-long process. But now the question that Joe Rogan asked him, which was I think very insightful, was Elizondo. Yes, Elizondo did that.
He wrote a book that he submitted for approval, and in the book they actually black out all the stuff that the Defense Department told him he couldn't talk about. So you can actually see how much and where and what they didn't want him talking about.
Interesting. Well, the question that Joe Rogan asked was, why is the Pentagon allowing you to nevertheless tease us with this information? You can't come out and say everything that you want to say, but you're still allowed to say some stuff about it. So why are they letting you just tease us with this information? And Elizondo, I think his theory And maybe it's more than just a theory for him because he's this person who was actually a part of this program. His claim is that there's people that have there's two different types of people in these programs. On the one hand, you have people who are eager to get everything out, eager to get the information out to the general public. But on the other hand, you still have these people who are like, no, it's way too soon. No, this is going to cause mass hysteria. No, we've got to keep all this stuff quiet. And so you have these two people groups kind of fighting back and forth. And that's why it ends up being these sorts of teasers where some information gets through, some information doesn't get through. I just found that interesting and I wanted to mention it.
Yeah, there's also a persistent problem with overclassification where the government, out of habit, classifies way too much stuff. And they talk about this in this hearing. I don't know if we have the clip on that, but I can certainly summarize it later if you want. The other thing I was going to mention is, so what Schellenberger is saying at the moment, he's naming alternatives to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and he just named one that doesn't get a lot of attention. So I think it's worth calling it out before we proceed with the clip. What he just named is the idea that UAP are some form of unknown natural phenomenon. And he mentions ball lightning as an example. Now, ball lightning is something that is recognized by science, but it is very poorly understood. And so the hypothesis is maybe this isn't from our technology, maybe it's not from other nations, maybe it's not aliens, maybe it's some kind of natural phenomenon that we just haven't figured out yet. And that's a hypothesis that needs to be considered. Personally, I think that that hypothesis could explain some UAP reports, especially like lights at night. When you see lights in the sky at night, okay, maybe that is some form of ball lightning that's doing weird stuff and can move in weird ways. What I find much harder to explain as just a purely natural, non-technological phenomenon is things you see in the daytime that look like nuts and bolts, aircraft. So I think there's some validity to this hypothesis. I think it needs to be considered, but I don't consider it to be plausible as an explanation for all the different kind of reports we've got. In any event, I think it's worth calling it out. Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead then and continue with this clip, and then we'll listen to, let's just finish this clip, and then we'll set up the next clip in just about 20 seconds.
Lightning or plasma. They could also be part of some new U.S. or foreign government weapons programs, such as drones, aircraft, balloons, CGI, hoaxes, or birds.
Yeah, so he's just laying out the different hypotheses that are on offer that don't entail that aliens are visiting us or trying to communicate with us or trying to do some sort of reconnaissance mission or gather information, whatever. He's just trying to give some reasonable non-ETI hypotheses or non-human intelligence hypotheses.
Whatever UAPs are, Congress must be informed, as must the people of the United States. We have a right to know what UAPs are, no matter what they are.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? What do you think that we have a right to know what these things are and that they should be telling us this information?
People use this phrase "right to know" all the time to justify things in the press. And it's like, okay, well, I have a right to know certain things. Like I have a right to know stuff that, directly impacts me and my loved ones in a major way that, if I have some use for the information, then I could argue I've got a natural law right to know about it. But people tend to overuse this phrase, to my mind. We don't have a right to know about every single classified program that's going on in the world. There is such a thing as legitimate secrecy for national defense. And, there are crusading journalists who would say, well, the public has a right to know about this. Not if it gives away information that's going to give our competitor states a tactical advantage over us. So I would say, if it turns out that that UAP are extraterrestrial, I would say people have a right to know that. You may not be able to disclose it immediately because people would freak out and you need to, get them ready for it. On the other hand, if it turns out that this is, a classified U.S. program, then I would say we may or may not have a right to know about it. If it's a classified Chinese or Russian program, which frankly I doubt, because what we've learned about China and Russia in recent times indicates that their military development is not as advanced as was previously thought. As the Ukraine war, for example, has demonstrated, and China's financial crisis and generational crisis is in the process of revealing. But if it turned out that the anomalous UAPs are Russian or Chinese craft, I think we do have a right to know that, because I don't need to know the technical details. But okay, if they've leapfrogged us technologically, we need to get on that. And we need to motivate the public to give the support needed to our military industrial complex to catch up with them. And so I think we would have a right to know that.
It's just not obvious that we have a right to know. It's not obvious.
It's not a blanket thing. I think it depends on what it turns out to be.
Exactly. Yep. All right. Well, we're about to actually learn. We're going to play in this next clip. We're going to learn why a journalist, because this guy, Mr. Schellenberger, Michael Schellenberger, he was invited to be part of this panel. There's a reason why he was invited as a journalist to participate in this panel, and we're about to learn that in just a second. But before we do that, I want to turn to some more super chats. So this one from Lebecca Lynn, she says, "What are your thoughts on Neuralink?" That is actually something that comes up here. I don't know if it comes up in this hearing or if it was in another hearing. But yes, this is a relevant question. I don't remember it in this
hearing. Yeah. So, Neuralink, I think they maybe alluded to it briefly in a question, but then they moved on from it and didn't really comment on it. So Neuralink is a technological interface. It's meant to be a brain-computer interface. And in terms of general thoughts, I think it's a good idea in principle. It could help disabled people, quadriplegics, paraplegics, and so forth, regain mobility and more ability to have agency and control in their lives. And as long as you can do it safely, and as long as it doesn't generate problems that counterbalance the benefits it brings to people, I think it's a great idea. Can this technology go wrong? Well, anyone who's ever seen an episode of Dark Mirror knows that almost any technology can go wrong, or Black Mirror. And yeah, I can imagine ways that Neuralink can go wrong. You start hooking it up to people, there could be invasions of privacy. You could mentally torture someone potentially with it, but that's the abuse of the technology rather than the use of the technology. I think where it becomes relevant here is there's some question of, could UAP be controlled through a brain-computer interface? Do we have any evidence of that? And I think that's where it comes up here. And I think the answer is unless we've got one and can study its control systems, I don't think there's any way of knowing that. So I think that we just don't know enough in this area yet to know if this is one of the control mechanisms that's in use in UAP, because we don't even know what the UAP are yet.
But Neuralink, at least one thing that it does is it shows us that it seems possible. Seems like this is a possible way that they could be controlling these different craft.
Yeah, but
it's a possibility.
So is a joystick, and we can think through these. I just wouldn't settle on any of them.
Right. All right. Kratos says, if they are from outer space, means that they may have millions of tech years ahead of us. Nothing travels faster than light. Do we really want to mess with these guys? So one thing that I would want to note here, though, is that depending on, there are methods of travel that I think are being sort of theorized right now that do go faster than light. If I'm correct about this, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Jimmy.
No, you're right about that.
So yeah, and these are sort of in the theory process of being developed right now. So mentioning that, it could be that these beings are only 1,000 years ahead of us. Imagine the amount of progress that we've made as a species in the last 100 years, 120 years. Imagine how much we're going to advance in the next 100,000 years. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean that these beings are hundreds of thousands or millions of years ahead of us. They could just be, 1,000 years. That amount of time, I think, is completely sufficient to explain if we are being visited and if these things are real. Then it seems like a completely legitimate hypothesis. I know that's kind of minor in response here, but Jimmy, what are your thoughts on this comment?
Well, so if they're coming here from another solar system, they have some kind of technology we don't, and it's an open question how far in advance of us they are. They could be 100 years in advance of us. They could be 1,000 years in advance of us. They could be 1,000,000 years in advance of us. There's no real way to know that. And all of those options have been explored in terms of thinking about what it would be like. For example, the Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle science fiction novel Footfall, which I highly recommend, envisions first contact with a race from a neighboring star system, and they are only like 100 years ahead of us. So they do not have super technology we could never compete with. In fact, by the end of the novel, we kick their butts, and it's a glorious moment. But it's also possible that people could be 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years ahead of us, and if that's the case, we would not be able to effectively compete with them militarily in all probability unless there is a technological wall between us and much, much higher technological levels. There is in scientific circles, there is a discussion of, are we in the process of hitting a wall scientifically? Because it's been noted that in the past we made major discoveries in science, and now the discoveries seem to be much smaller and more incremental. And so the argument is that we found the easy stuff to solve. We found the low-hanging fruit, and we collected it all. And now science is just going to be much harder, and we hit this wall in terms of scientific and technological development. It's kind of like, it's kind of like with computer chips are not doubling in capacity at the same rate they used to. Moore's law, either has broken down or is in the process of breaking down. So if there's a wall, even if they have 1,000,000-year head start on us, they may not be as much advanced. Also, I don't know that nothing travels faster than light. As you mentioned, there are solutions to Einstein's equations that allow for faster than light travel. One of them that's being explored right now is known as the Alcubierre warp drive, where you have a ship in a warp bubble, and this is the actual terminology they use. You have a ship in a warp bubble, and the ship is not moving faster than light, but space itself is not limited by the speed of light. Space can expand faster than the speed of light and is doing that. And so hypothetically, if you have a little bubble of space, you could move that bubble of space faster than light, and then the ship that's in the bubble travels with it. So, this requires some exotic stuff that we don't have at the moment, but it is hypothetically possible. To get to Kratos's bigger question, though, do we want to mess with these guys if they're coming here from another solar system? That is a really good question. And Lou Elizondo, in his book that came out a couple of months ago, the book is called Imminent, if you want to look it up or read it. But he talks about that question in the book of, if we do have visitors from out of town, is talking about them in public the best idea? Because they could squash us like a bug. Even in Footfall, where we're just dealing with a race that's 100 years ahead of us, they drop an asteroid into the Indian Ocean. That's what the Foot is in the novel, and it causes massive devastation on the Earth. All you got to do is throw rocks from space, and we are toast. So anyone who can cross interstellar distances can do that. So there is a risk in talking about this in public. Elizondo concludes that it's a risk that's ultimately worth taking, as opposed to burying our heads in the sands and not knowing what's going on and not preparing for potential encounters.
I was going to mention that Elizondo mentioned that in his Joe Rogan interview as well. That could be a reason, again, why people are so averse to getting this knowledge out there, because if it does get out there and like it does turn out that there's this malevolent force that is trying to do this sort of reconnaissance on our species and stuff like that, would have some pretty major implications on the everyday life of people, which then might actually go back to Mr. Schellenberger's point that we have a right to know this, because it really would impact us in a really big way.
Assuming we can use the information in some way. Even if the information impacts me, but I don't have any way of acting on it, I'm not sure I've got a right in that case.
So let's do this. We've had several more super chats come in. Let's take a break from those. We've just addressed a couple here. We'll come back to super chats in just a little bit. Let's get to this document that Mr. Schellenberger. This is the reason why he showed up at this hearing. Very, very, very interesting stuff. And this clip is about 3 minutes long, and we're going to listen and pause and comment along the way. This is about to get really interesting.
However, we now have existing and former U.S. government officials who have told Congress that AARO and the Pentagon have broken the law by not revealing a significant body of information about UAPs, including military intelligence databases that have evidence of their existence as physical craft. One of those individuals is a current or former U.S. government official acting as a UAP whistleblower. This person has written a report. This is the report that says the executive branch has been managing UAP, NHI issues without congressional knowledge, oversight, or authorization for some time, quite possibly decades. Furthermore, these individuals have revealed the name of an active and highly secretive DoD unacknowledged special access program, or USAP. The source of that document told me, that the USAP is a strategic intelligence program that is part of the U.S. military family of long-standing, highly sensitive programs dealing with various aspects of the UAP problem. The new UAP whistleblower claims that the U.S. military and IC database includes videos and images taken using infrared, forward-looking infrared, full-motion video, and still photography. The report that was just shared with Congress says Immaculate Constellation serves as a central or parent USAP that consolidates observations of UAPs by both tasked and untasked collection platforms.
Okay, so the document itself is called the Immaculate Constellation.
Well, the Special Access Program, not the document, but yeah.
Correct. Yes, yeah, the Special Access Program. Let's talk about it. I mean, there's still some more of this clip that we'll get through, because he's going to talk about some of the specifics of the document. But I mean, first of all, the name of it.
Well, Immaculate Constellation is a plausible Defense Department code name. Code names are typically these days composed of two elements, and the way they're generated is they present when the decision maker picks a code name, and they have to do it every few years because they change the names of programs so that spies don't learn about the program. You want to make it hard for them to learn about it. That's the reason for a code name in the first place. And if you leave the code name the same forever, it just makes it easier to learn about the program. So they change it every few years, I think like every 5 years or something. And when they do that, they give you two lists of words that are generated by computer. The computer has a list of potential words, and they give you a selection from from two different lists, and you pick one word from one list and one word from another list. And sometimes there are interesting combinations that come up. The Defense Department's former remote viewing program originally, I forget what its original name was, but it became known as things like center lane. And so they had a selection of words, and the word center was on one list and lane was on the other list, so they called it center lane. And then a few years go by, they've got to change the name again, and lo and behold, on one list we've got star, and on the other list we've got gate, and so they decided to call it Stargate, and they called it that before the movie and the TV show came out, by the way. Well, in this case, it looks like on one list they had Immaculate, and on the other list they had Constellation. And it sounds kind of like Immaculate Conception, only it's got Constellation in there, which is spacey. And so they decided that would be kind of a fun name to have for this program. And so they called it Immaculate Constellation.
So what should we just continue playing the clip here, because he gets into some of the details? Otherwise, we can discuss some of the details, because you've actually read the document in full. Is that correct?
Yes, I've been through it more than once.
Let's do this. Let's just continue, because he lays out some of the specifics, and then if you want, just tell me to pause, and then we can continue. You can add any more details on top of the contents that he discusses in this clip.
Okay.
Immaculate Constellation includes high-quality imagery intelligence and measurement and signature intelligence of UAPs, the whistleblower's report adds. The sources of this intelligence are a blend of directed and incidental collection capabilities, positioned in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, as well as military and civilian aviation altitudes and maritime environments. The report to Congress details in detail various UAPs, including spheres, orbs, disks, saucers, ovals, triangles, boomerang, arrowhead, and irregular organic. The report describes various incidents found in the human intelligence databases. One involved orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of its patrol area. In another incident, the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier watched a small orange-red sphere rapidly descend from a high altitude of 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of the CVN, or aircraft carrier.
Why don't we pause for a moment? So he's describing this document that is the public version of a report. Apparently, there is a longer private version that would allude to classified material, but this version of the report is apparently cleared for public release, not in the sense that it's been officially approved, but in the sense that it doesn't contain any classified information. The report is by an unknown individual to us.
To us. Apparently, that Mr. Schellenberger, though, he knows who this was.
He knows who it is.
Him or her.
He knows who it is. He's also checked out this person, and he's had the claims regarding Immaculate Constellation confirmed by at least a couple of other people who he's also checked out and vetted. Now, in the document, it's composed of, I think, 7 sections. Only one of the sections deals with Immaculate Constellation. So in that section, it reveals that Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program. Now, special access programs are ones that you have to have special clearance in order to access. That's why they're called special access programs. And this one is unacknowledged, meaning they haven't acknowledged this is a real program. And so thus it has thus far evaded congressional oversight. That's the claim, because they're not acknowledging it exists, so it's not reported to Congress. And that's the key problem that they are wanting to get addressed here. They want Congress to know about this program so that Congress can assume oversight of it. In the section that deals with Immaculate Constellation, it says that it was created after Lou Elizondo left the Defense Department in 2017 and went public. And its purpose was to basically hoover up a whole bunch of UAP data so that they could avoid congressional oversight. And so he says Immaculate Constellation is a parent program. It has several sub-programs. Its principal function is to collect imagery. And it collects imagery through various means, but it may deal with other aspects of the UAP problem, but it's specific. The report says its main function is to collect imagery and keep that imagery, in essence, away from Congress and away from congressional oversight. In other sections of the report, it goes on, and that's what he's describing now, to describe things that are in UAP databases, not at Immaculate Constellation, but in other databases that have not had sufficient attention paid to them because they're kind of scattered and fragmented around different government departments. So like right now, he's talking about some of the encounters that have been reported and that we have data on. The report also has a discussion of major classes of different types of UAPs that have been reported. Spheres is the most common. That's about half of all UAPs seem to be spheres or orbs. They also talk about tic tacs, which are cylindrical with rounded edges. They talk about arrowhead-shaped ones. They talk about boomerang-shaped ones. And so they have a discussion of the major types of UAPs, how common they are, and what some of their major characteristics are. Like one of the things the report says about Tic Tacs is, even though we've had cylinders before, the Tic Tac shape itself only starts getting reported after 2003. And so that seems like it's been recently introduced in the history of UAPs. Who's ever making them, they only seem to have started arriving in 2003. So the report actually covers more than just Immaculate Constellation. And I find it very interesting. But Immaculate Constellation is the big thing to me because it's something that we genuinely didn't know before. Now we've got a name. If this program exists, then it would be eminently doable for people with the right access to be able to look into the Defense Department and say, does this program exist or not, and find evidence of it one way or another. I'm sure that is it Josh Greenwald of the Black Vault has already started filing Freedom of Information Act, appeals with the name Immaculate Constellation in them to find out, can we get any information about this on the public side of things? But certainly on the private side of things, it should be verifiable. Also, one other little note about the author of this publication, you'll notice that Schellenberger says it's a present or former employee of the Defense Department. And if it's a former one, it's only very recently former, because the report includes material from 2023. So if the person has left the Defense Department and lost access to the data that was used to compile the report, it had to be a very recent departure. And for that reason, I suspect the person is actually still a current employee of the Defense Department.
Yeah, all super interesting stuff. Let's go ahead and turn now to some more super chats before we continue with the congressional hearing. We've got several more clips lined up that are all very, very interesting. All right, Blake Stone says, folks from Black Project world like Sal Pace claim that NHI that NHI are involved, but what both pro and anti-disclosure people are protecting are scandalously withheld advancements in human tech. Thank you both for still covering this.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
So for folks who may not know, Salvatore Pais is I guess he's an engineer or physicist who works for the Navy. And he's filed a number of patents that the Navy has gone to bat for, that the patent office initially was inclined to decline because they're technological patents that sound crazy. Like here's how you can create a warp bubble around a ship and make it invisible and stuff like that. But the Navy went to bat for him and said, no, we want this guy to have the patent. We think there's merit to this. And if Pais is correct that he's made the technological breakthroughs that he's claimed, it's game changing for human technology. It would result in Star Trek like technology for us if he's really done what he's claimed. Now, Blackstone, aka Blackstone, reports that Salvatore Pais has said that NHI or non-human intelligence is involved. Well, that's interesting. I haven't seen Pais claim that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had. But then, aka Blakestone, is saying that both pro and anti-disclosure people are protecting scandalously withheld advancements in human tech. Well, if Pais is right and he's actually made the breakthroughs technologically that he's claimed, then yeah, that statement has merit. We would have tech that is very dramatically in advance of conventionally available technology, at least in the prototype stage. And for the moment, that's being withheld, and that's somewhat understandable. If you have a big new technological breakthrough, you don't want to immediately give all of your competitors access to it. So, I can understand holding back a little bit on this, but there would be technology that is significantly in advance of normal technology that is being withheld. If Pais is correct in what he's claiming, there is a debate about that, because his patents sound so crazy that, and you don't have to produce a working model to get a patent. You just have to describe how you want the machine to work. And it could be that they really are crazy, and he's mistaken or a con man or something, and has snookered the Navy into supporting him. So I don't know whether his claims are accurate or not. They may be, they may not be. If they are accurate, they're game changing.
Let's move to another super chat from Black Dread. Isn't Elizondo a counterintelligence officer, and doesn't that kind of raise some red flags given the history of the UFO field? For example, Richard Doty.
Yeah, well, Elizondo does have a background in intelligence, but he wasn't working in counterintelligence as a member of OSAP or ATIP. And I am suspicious of people with intelligence backgrounds, but I can't just write off what they all say. The cautionary tale that Black Dread Scotland mentions involving Richard Doty is a cautionary tale that needs to be paid attention to. Richard Doty was an Air Force counterintelligence officer in the Air Force Office of Special Investigations in New Mexico back during the 1980s. And there was a businessman in New Mexico who detected some activity at Kirtland Air Force Base that he thought might be extraterrestrial, and he wanted to alert the base to what he was finding, and so he did. And the Office of Special Investigations, I have a two-part mysterious world on this, but the Air Force Office of Special Investigations had him liaise with an agent named Richard Doty, and Richard Doty, under orders, he says, basically misled the businessman. His name was Paul Benowitz, and Doty he confirmed that, you've picked up on alien stuff here. And he ended up spinning this elaborate alien narrative that Benowitz bought into. And, you have claims of underground bases and stuff like that. And it ultimately caused Benowitz to have a nervous breakdown, because he thought we were in the middle of an alien invasion, and it was all Air Force disinformation. And so, as I point out at the in part 2, where I look at Richard Doty's involvement in this, Richard Doty is a lying liar who lies. And so it always raises a question whenever there's someone with an intelligence background, or even if you don't know that, you have to watch out for the possibility of disinformation. One of the questions you'd want to ask in proposing disinformation, though, is who is benefiting from it? Mm-hmm. In the Cold War, Benowitz had uncovered, and in the 80s and into the 90s, Benowitz had uncovered U.S. technological projects, and the alien interpretation of those projects was a cover story to keep him distracted from figuring out what he really had. And so if you want to propose Lou Elizondo as a disinformation agent, how does the con work? Who's benefiting from it? Because if UAP are classified American projects, calling attention to them is not a good thing, and starting a whole, structure in the military industrial complex like Arrow to look into them and figure them out, that's only calling more attention to U.S. projects. And if they're competitor state projects, why not just be honest and say, guess what, everybody? The sky is falling. The Russians and Chinese are totally outclassing us. We need to get on this now, instead of this big distraction about it being aliens if we know it's not aliens. So I don't see a plausible account of why Elizondo would currently be doing disinformation on this.
All right, let's move to another super chat from Pop. Apparently, there are lots of UAPs off the coastline of San Diego that were spotted by the Air Force in the past. If I lived there, I'd certainly be watching out. San Diego has all the luck. Haha.
Well, I used to live in San Diego, and I was impressed to know that when the Tic Tac incident was revealed, that it had happened off the coast of San Diego. I have seen, what appear to be Defense Department projects being tested off the coast of Southern California, but I moved back to Arkansas because California is just too much.
Too much? What do you mean by that?
Oh, it's not to my taste in many and various ways.
All right. Fair enough.
It's beautiful.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, I mean the weather over there, you can't beat it. It's hard to beat. Let's do this. Let's turn back to the congressional hearing now. We're going to hear from Elizondo, who has asked whether or not UAPs are made by the government, and then if not, who are they made by? Let's listen to his response here.
Okay. All right. Okay, Mr. Elizondo, you state in your testimony that, quote, advanced technologies not by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe, end quote. If these technologies are not made by any government, who's making them? Private companies, or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human intelligence?
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years, to put this in perspective,
are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
It may be both.
Okay.
When it comes to Blue Force Technologies, I would not be able to discuss.
Okay. Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?
We would have to have a conversation in a closed session, ma'am. I signed documentation 3 years ago that restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals. I submitted for my book through the DOPSR process, which took a year for it to be reviewed. And what is in the book is what I was told I'm allowed to talk about.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes.
Does the U.S. government have any reverse? Okay, we already answered that question about.
Well, Arrow denies all of this stuff, right? He said that there's no evidence of any sort of ETI or non-human intelligence, NHI.
Well, Arrow says they haven't found any evidence, meaning proof. But if the claim is accurate that there are unacknowledged special access programs that exist, then they're not feeding their data to Arrow. And so there could be other programs besides Arrow that do have, have done crash retrieval and reverse engineering and stuff. It's just that that Arrow, which is very new, it only got started in 2022. It just hadn't encountered that yet, and maybe it's being deliberately hid from Arrow.
Any other thoughts on this clip?
Well, I found it interesting that Elizondo said that he would have to talk with her when she asked him, have you ever been read on to a crash retrieval program? He said, I'd have to talk with you in a SCIF. A SCIF is a secure location where you can have conversations about classified information. And so, have you been read on? If the answer was no, then why couldn't he just say no? Now, he does say that 3 years ago, so that would be 2021, which is several years after he left the Defense Department, he said he signed documentation restricting what he could say specifically about crash retrieval. So it could be he's never been read on, but he is restricted from what he's allowed to say. They may have made him sign a paper that says you can never discuss crash retrieval, or here are the limits of what you can discuss. He does go on to say, when she asks him, have they done crash retrieval programs? He says yes. Yeah. So apparently he feels he can say that. And she asks, have they done reverse engineering? He again says yes. So there's something very interesting here. I would like to know more about it, but I don't have the right access. Incidentally, there are, just so folks may be aware, so there are programs to retrieve non-U.S. technology if it crashes, or becomes non-functional. For example, this actually, listeners have probably heard the phrase, I can neither confirm nor deny. That's what's known as the Glomar response. And the Glomar response was created because the Russians had a sub that sank. And this was back during the Cold War. And so the U.S. government wanted to salvage this sub so we could get a look at, Russian submarine technology. And so they needed a cover for that. And so they went to Howard Hughes, who was kind of the Elon Musk of his day. He was a big American industrialist businessman and also a little odd. But they had him create a ship that was ostensibly for oceanographic purposes. It was called, if I recall correctly, the Global Explorer. And they then used this. It was like, I think it was going to, is in part for purposes of hoisting oil rigs or something, and used this ship to salvage the Russian submarine. But when they were asked about it in the press, they came up with this formula of I can neither confirm nor deny it. Well, that program was to salvage foreign technology, and there have been other foreign technology salvage programs. One of the ones that's been connected with UFOs is a project called Moondust. And Moondust, ostensibly it's like, okay, to collect foreign aircraft that have crashed or that we've otherwise gotten so we can reverse engineer them. But the claim is that some of these, there are crash retrieval programs. They're ostensibly for earthly tech, like a submarine or an airplane. But the claim is being made that actually these programs are shielding UAP crash recoveries from potentially non-human intelligence.
Let's go ahead then and continue with this next clip. This next clip in Schellenberger is asked why he believes that his source is credible for the document that he provided.
And then why do you believe your sources to be credible? How do you judge the veracity of the documentation you've been provided about this program?
I checked the sources, and they are who they say they are. They are current or former government officials. Mm-hmm. I wanted to also add that I did not specify that they were Defense Department employees. I didn't specify the agency nor the gender.
Would they have included non-government employees, people that aren't employed by the government?
I'm comfortable saying that these are government or previously government employees.
Yeah, so he's just giving why he thinks that his source is credible. Any other thoughts on that, or should we continue playing here?
No, I think a key thing is that he's got confirmation from more than one source. The document mentioned in Immaculate Constellation was written by one person, apparently. In fact, if I recall correctly, it even uses the first person singular pronoun I in it. But to have confirmation from more than one credible source, that's important, especially if you can't reveal who the author is.
In this next section, just continuing from this clip here, they discuss what the public needs to know about the document itself. Any
of them currently employed by a private contractor or private contractors?
I'd rather not say.
Okay. What's the key takeaway, just a few seconds, about the Immaculate Constellation document you provided us today?
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video photos, other sensor information, and they have for a very long time. And it's not those fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear
high
resolution.
How many visuals, graphics, videos, photos?
I mean, I've been told hundreds, maybe thousands. I mean, I also wanted to say, because there was some conversation around concern around the revealing of these materials, revealing the source collections, but some of these are shot from helicopters using normal videos of oceans. I just think that's absurd that somehow you're going to be revealing some secret U.S. technology by revealing that you've photographed orbs off the coast of Kuwait.
So one question that I've got for you is any of this information that we've covered so far, is any of it new? I mean, haven't we known that there are thousands of images that just haven't been revealed to the public and stuff? What new information did we learn from this whole thing?
Well, so we've known about these classes of information before. I mean, ever since 2017, it's been acknowledged that these three videos that got released, they are just the tip of the iceberg. They're what's been declassified, but there's a lot more and a lot better imagery. But what's new is some of the specifics. Like he just mentioned photographing orbs from a helicopter off the coast of Kuwait with ordinary video. So it's not like a super classified stealth camera, thing it's going to reveal our technological capabilities. If it's declassified, it's just going to be another video taken with commercial ordinary equipment. So nothing classified about it. This would be an example of overclassification. One of the reasons I probably should clarify for classification is you don't want to reveal your sources and methods to your competitors. And so if you've got like super snazzy gun cameras on your aircraft, you don't want Russia and China knowing what kind of resolution can you get with those cameras, because then they can try to figure out ways to trick those cameras. But if someone is in a helicopter with an ordinary camcorder or an iPhone or something like that, there's nothing classified about that. You don't need to protect your source and method in this case. You could declassify that and it would be fine. So that's a point he's making about overclassification.
Why don't we then continue with some more from the congressional hearing? And this one, I think, this clip is probably one of the most interesting to me personally, because I hadn't known this prior to this congressional hearing, that there are actually reports of biological effects during these experiences with UAPs. Didn't know this. Very, very interesting stuff. I think it has all sorts of interesting implications as well if these are accurate. So let's listen to this clip. This one's about two or 3 minutes long.
Mr. Schellenberger, in this report, it's just striking to me that regarding the descriptions of experiences with these various craft, several of them include biological effects and several do not. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so spheres and orbs, triangular craft, and irregular or organic craft include some descriptions of biological effects, including feelings of unease, electronic device malfunctions, long-term psychological effects such as anxiety or insomnia have been noted, the feeling of being watched, a shared awareness with the triangle craft, and under the irregular and organic craft, biological effects include physical sensations of warmth or cold and unexplained smells and psychological distress.
So he was about to ask a question about like, what is the ratio between the two? Like how often do these occur? These biological effects occur, and then how can we study that? Interesting question, I suppose. But it was just shocking to learn that this is one of the phenomena that is recorded in these experiences. And then it also seems to have a lot of overlap with parapsychology, which is an area that you've done a lot of research in as well. So or the paranormal parapsychology. Tell me what's going on with this.
Okay, well, so there have been reports of UFOs having effects on people for ages. This goes back a huge way. I mean, like even if you watch the 1970s movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind that Steven Spielberg made, which is, it's fictional, but it's based on actual UFO reports. Richard Dreyfuss in that movie, he has physical effects after he encounters a UAP. He's got like this sunburn and stuff. And missing time is another physical effect that people report. They don't know. It's like more time has passed than should have. I'm missing some time that I ought to have memories of. And so these would be physiological effects as a result of encounters with UAP. And in fact, Lou Elizondo says that they're basically so common that they could be considered one of the so-called observables. One of the things that OSAP ATIP did was they started classifying UAP based on their observed characteristics, and they referred to these as the observables. And there's something like 5 observables. There's something like the ability to move at hypersonic speeds, the ability to suddenly accelerate, low visibility, transmedium ship, meaning the ability to cross between like space and atmosphere or atmosphere and sea. And so they had these several observables, but they also had all these reports of biological effects. And I kind of got the vibe, I'd have to go back and check, but I kind of got the vibe from the book that they didn't want to classify that as one of the observables, not because they didn't have evidence for it, but because it was a little creepier and disturbing, and they didn't want to disturb people. In terms of the effects that they talk about here, now they're not all biological. Like one of the things that the congressman from Louisiana mentioned is, electronic devices malfunction. Okay, that's not a biological effect. It is an effect, but it's not a biological one. And the document that Schellenberger gave to Congress, which they're all reading for the first time, they apparently just got it minutes earlier, so they're processing it in real time. The document does list a number of different reported effects, but just because there's a reported effect doesn't mean it's due to the UAP. One of the things I noticed about the effects that are mentioned in the document is quite a number of them are subjective and psychological in nature, and could be due to purely natural causes. Like if I'm watching a UAP and I don't know what it is, I might feel uneasy for that reason. I'm watching some strange thing. Yeah, and if I have a encounter with it, I mean, maybe I'm someone who's never taken the possibility of alien life seriously, and suddenly I'm confronted with this thing. I mean, I might have insomnia or anxiety after that. So I'm not convinced that that all of these reported effects are due to the UAP itself.
Right.
But some of
them are a little bit more interesting. Like you have like a sort of direct connection with it and feel some sort of.
Well, that one I'm a little skeptical of, just because people can imagine, things. If you've heard aliens are telepathic and you're seeing a ship and wondering if it's telepathic, you might imagine that you're in telepathic contact with someone on board the ship. And yeah, maybe you are, but maybe you're not either. So I'm kind of skeptical of that. I'm more interested in like feelings of heat or cold, because that's quantifiable. And I'm more interested in, are there permanent medically diagnosable effects that are not simply psychological in nature? Like
the hot and cold actually has a lot of overlap with the demonic possession cases that I've covered on my channel.
Yeah, it has a lot to do. Hot and cold can be generated by all kinds of things, not just demons. One of the things that's been pointed out is, if you stand next to a jet, just an ordinary jet, when it's taken off and you're near one of the engines, that will have biological effects on you. There's this huge roar and noise, and there's all this vibration, and you're exposed to the exhaust of the jet, and there's you can have biological effects from ordinary technologies. And so let me be clear, I'm not saying that it is demons. I'm just saying that there's that one of the reasons why this was interesting to me is that because there does seem to be some overlap between these two. And what I mean by overlap is that the same physical effects are described in both cases, not to say that that's a direct causation or correlation. Yeah. Just that there's a similar. My point is just technologies, different technologies will have biological effects depending on what it is. Cars and their exhaust have biological effects on people. That's why people who commit suicide sometimes use car exhaust to do it. So there are biological effects from technologies. We shouldn't regard that as exotic. What I find more interesting is which effects are produced, and can we use that to learn anything about the technology that is producing such effects? Missing time is the most interesting because, and Elizondo actually discusses this in his book, they have a proposed, I'm going to do a mysterious world about this, but they have a proposed explanation for most of the observables, and it involves time dilation. And time dilation would produce missing time. If you get within a time dilated zone, then time is going to pass faster outside of that zone than it will for you. And that could be an explanation for why people report missing time. It's not that they were abducted and had their memories wiped. It's just that they were in a time dilated zone and time was passing faster outside of that zone.
Interesting. Let's turn now to some more super chats, and then we'll turn back, and we've got a couple more clips lined up to listen to. And these last clips are some of the most spicy, so you definitely want to stick around for those. All right, this next one's from Pop again. Actually, no, we've had more than that have come in. So Apollos says, great point. Government clearances are need to know, allowing for misunderstandings. Science equals multiple labs, double check your methods, and reproduce results. Any thoughts on this comment?
Yeah, well, the having need to know programs, which is, part of intelligence work, that can result in misunderstandings where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And in order to do science, you do need to replicate. You do need to let other people look at your data and consider whether there are other possible explanations. And so, yeah, all that's true.
All right, next super chat from Pop. In Elizondo's book, Imminent, he mentioned having orbs appear in his own home.
You really enjoy that final plosive, don't you?
I do. I don't know why. Pop. Yeah, maybe it's because I got this real thick pop filter on my
okay.
Microphone. I like it.
Overcoming. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge too. You got to overcome that pop filter.
Exactly.
Here in the Ozarks, we actually tend not to pronounce the little explosive effect after final plosives like that. So I would just say stop instead of stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'll have to pay attention actually next time I use a plosive and see what I do. All right, Pop says, in Elizondo's book Imminent, he mentioned having orbs appear in his own home for years. I thought it odd and finky that he never took any footage. That is an interesting anecdote, isn't it?
I don't know that he didn't. He may have home videos of these, and he may just not want to put them out there for everyone to look at and speculate on and accuse him of faking them and things like that. Because even if you put him out, people would say, "Oh, he this is fake, and he's faking it," and it would just give more fuel to people who want to be critical of him.
This is an interesting super chat from another one from Blakestone. Jesse Michaels, I think that's, Michaels is a huge secular commentator on this topic and has expressed a rekindling of Christian conviction arising from these revelations. Cam, keep him in mind, could be a good interviewee. Very interesting. I don't know this person. Do you know Jesse Michaels?
No. I mean, the name sounds familiar, but I don't have specific memories.
Interesting. All right, let's now continue with the congressional hearing. Now we've got two more clips lined up. In this one, the panel is asked about the nature of the pilots of these UAPs. So let's listen to this one, about a 3-minute clip.
By a UAP.
In our previous panel, we had Grush, and he had testified to say that some of these were interdimensional beings. Can you speak on that at all?
Ma'am, I'm not qualified, certainly as a scientist or otherwise, to speculate points of origin. I looked at everything from a scientific perspective. So if you look at, for example, instantaneous acceleration, which was one of the observables of the program that I belong to, ATIP, the human body can withstand about 9 G-forces for a short period of time before you suffer negative biological consequences, blackouts and ultimately redouts and even death. Comparison, our best technology, the F-16, which is one of this older platform, but one of our most highly maneuverable aircraft, manned aircraft, made by General Dynamics, can perform about 17 or 18 G-forces before you start having structural failure, meaning that the airframe begins to disintegrate while you're flying. The vehicles we're talking about are performing in excess of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Gs.
He looks like he didn't even want to mention this fact. Like he was hesitant to mention how fast these things are actually going.
I think he was hesitant because he was trying to remember the exact number. He didn't want to say the wrong number. That would be my guess.
It seemed to me like he was kind of wondering whether or not it was okay to mention these specific details. But
it could be, although he talks about speeds in his book, so I think he's already mentioned those numbers. But you could be right.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's just so many. Yeah. Anyways, let's continue this clip.
So are you, I guess, would it be safe to infer that they're living craft?
I'm not prepared at this point to state for the record is something alive or not, because even that definition is hard. There was a time in science we thought that life required oxygen, and we now know that's not true. There are anaerobic bacteria that thrive in oxygen environments that lack oxygen. And so also same with photosynthesis. When I was in college, I was told everything is derived from photosynthesis as a form of energy. In reality, that's not true. There are things that live off of chemosynthesis. So we're constantly having to reevaluate our understanding of what the definition of life is.
Mm-hmm. Do any of you ever come across reports from people that claim to have firsthand experiences with these entities, whatever they might be, or these aircraft, and then as a result, whether or not they're religious, find that these things will automatically disappear? Anyone, this is open to any of you on the panel. So just real quick, because I'm running out of time.
Maybe we should get clarity on what she's asking here, right? She's asking whether or not, if they're religious, these people that have these experiences, if they're religious and the things disappear, because there are such reports.
Yeah. So, presumably if something disappears in front of you and the only variable that distinguishes you from someone else that it doesn't disappear in front of is that you're religious, presumably that would be an argument that this is demonic or something. I can imagine other explanations, but she's certainly hinting around the demon issue.
She's trying to get to it. Yeah. She's trying to get an answer from them.
Unfortunately, she kind of drops this and doesn't really get an answer to this.
Yeah. It was so weird how she asked this really interesting question and then just kind of moves on really quickly. Well, let's just continue.
Lou?
Ma'am, I've always been a nuts and bolts kind of guy. When I was at ATIP, I was focusing more on the performance characteristics and less on the potential occupants.
Okay, the reason I ask is because it seems like, just based on our conversations, that we've had people that say that there are good and bad of whatever these things are. And so my concern from a national security perspective is A, that true? B, are you guys hearing the reports of that? And C, I think moving forward in regard to technology, Mr. Gold, if you can answer this real quickly, some of these aircraft, it seems that they are operating off of energy that we don't currently have. But just yes or no, in your opinion, if we were able to obtain that, would that impact humanity for the better or negative?
See, she's asking really good questions, but she's just going too fast through all of them.
I know she's all over the place, and she says she's running out of time, but still, it's better to get a thorough answer to one question than partial answers to 6. Yeah. Well, let's listen to Gold's
certainly
response.
save us some money on funding on Artemis.
Definitely.
And this is a national security issue, that if there is such technology out there, we're not the only country that might have access to it. We don't want to be on the wrong end of technological surprise.
Okay.
For people who may not remember, Mr. Gold is a former NASA official, and NASA has recently taken an interest in trying to figure out this question. And he's not the kind of the lightning rod of this. That would be Schellenberger and Elizondo. But Gold is actually, he comes across as a very friendly, supportive guy who's interested in this question and would like it solved and would like more money to solve it.
I just noticed this guy in the background with all the tattoos.
Oh yeah.
That's funny.
I find it fun watching the people in the background in these videos, because I know some of them.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, at least I can recognize them. And like, for example, in last year's hearings, it's like, oh, there's George Knapp, and oh, there's Jeremy Corbell, and in this one of the ladies in the background is, oh, that's Leslie Keene, and her I actually know. I took a class with her, so it's kind of fun to look at all the people in the background while everyone is trying to phrase their answer really, really, really carefully.
Well, I felt like this was a good clip to end on, because this is one of the most clipped portions of this congressional hearing that you've probably seen online, and it's basically where he goes down the line and asks them a question, and they give like a one-word response to his question, and all four men give their own respective answer. But after this, I'm going to ask Jimmy what his overall thoughts are on the entire thing. So stick with us. We're going to get some commentary on this clip, and then we'll get some sort of closing thoughts from Jimmy here. But let's watch this clip.
Testimony before. But just to set the agenda, just if we can go down real briefly, do you believe, just for the record, that the federal government, any part of the federal government, is knowingly concealing evidence about UAPs from the public?
Yes, sir.
100%.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I also want to just go down the line. And I know many of you have already said this, but I just, for the record again, just briefly, what do you believe UAPs could be or are?
Strong evidence that they are non-human, higher intelligence.
I echo my colleague's comment, sir.
Genuinely do not know.
Don't know, but we must find out.
There we go. And then let's turn it over to Jimmy. What do you think all of this is?
Well, I thought this was a constructive hearing. I also thought the Senate hearing, which we haven't covered today, was also good. It featured the current head of Arrow, and he actually was able to discuss some cases that have been resolved, and what the natural explanations for them were. But he also indicated we've got unknown stuff that we're looking at, and he was also very much, we want people to talk to us. They've had trouble getting certain people to talk to them, but he was like telling the senators, please encourage people to come talk to us. We will listen to them. We will take them seriously, and so forth. So I thought it was very constructive. I thought this was very constructive as well. Obviously I'd like to know a lot more that they said they couldn't discuss except in a skiff. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be invited to be in their skiff anytime soon, but I thought it was positive, and I especially thought it was positive that we got the name Immaculate Constellation, because that gives us a hook to do further research and find out if, as all four of them said, there are parts of the U.S. government that are hiding information about UAPs from Congress.
So, man, I'm contemplating whether or not to talk about this. Ashton Forbes, do you remember us discussing him? Ashton Forbes is the guy, the MH370 guy.
Oh, him. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there was this footage, and it was released in conjunction around the same time. Maybe I should rephrase that. It started to come back in prominence because these clips were released within hours after MH370 went missing, and these clips are of these orbs like traveling. Let me see if I can actually just pull this up really quickly. Yeah, so you've got these orbs that are floating around the plane, and then it suddenly just disappears. Let's see if it's going to play it in this clip here. Otherwise, I can.
That was a crossfade.
Yeah, it looks like it might do it here. There's a lot of other clips from Ashton that we could pull up that show it. But anyways, this guy, his claim, he actually went on X not too long ago and claimed that Arrow was ghosting him. So he's been trying to get in contact with them about these clips because they disappear. These clips about MH370 that are allegedly about MH370. These orbs start traveling around the plane, and then the plane like disappears suddenly. Yeah. And so he claims that he was trying to submit this to Arrow, and they were ghosting him about this. So.
Yeah. Okay. So two thoughts. First one is, for people who may not remember, MH370 was the Malaysian airliner that vanished a number of years ago over the Indian Ocean, apparently, and that we've never found the complete wreckage of it. We found little parts of it. And so this guy is claiming that he's got videos of the plane being abducted or dislocated by aliens, or what seem to be aliens. At least that's the broader narrative. Actually, the Senate investigation, or the Senate hearing that happened this week too, could shed a little bit of light on that, because one of the things they discussed is they're trying to set up a way for the public to submit reports, including video. And they decided that they considered a number of options, like, do we need a special app for this or whatever? What they decided is they're going to have a form on their website that you fill out, and then you can attach supporting evidence like videos and stuff to it. And they're in the process of getting that set up now, but it's not yet ready. So it may be that as soon as they get that rolled out, this guy can put his videos in it and submit them to Arrow. Now, do I think that that these videos provide evidence of MH370 being abducted? No. These videos have been looked at by visual effects artists, and in fact, can you go to the one that has the big circle where the plane flies into it? Visual effects artists have looked at this and debunked them. In fact, it turns out that the big splash, that big circular splash, is available as part of it's part of the software package that they actually use. It's this exact splash. So,
it's not exact. That's one of the things that Ashton Forbes
I'm about to clarify. It is the same splash with slight modifications made to it. And so it's a known video effect that is commercially available. It's part of standard software packages. And whoever made this video just used it and then tweaked it slightly so it wouldn't be immediately recognizable.
Which is actually really impressive that someone went out of their way to do that. I even saw a video from Ashton where, see how these orbs are kind of going around? It actually, there's at one point where it goes through the tail end right here, which they say is actually a fire on the airplane. It's not from the jet engines, because that's not what the jet engines actually do. It's from fire. But there's an image of the orb going through the trail here and displacing the smoke. And so if this person paid that close attention to just like on one random pass, it displaces the smoke trail. That's pretty impressive that they had that much attention to detail in a clip like this.
That's how you hoodwink people into thinking you're a fake video isn't fake.
Yep. Yeah. And the guys, the visual effects guys, what was the name of the YouTube channel? Do you remember?
It was VFX.
I want to give them credit.
See if I can pull it up. Hang on just a second.
I want to give them credit. But yeah, they pointed out a whole lot of interesting things about this clip. But the main takeaway is that the image of the sort of graphic at the end with the bubble and how it kind of disappears, that was there's too many similarities to dismiss. And this guy Ashton Forbes, he's got his own response to that and stuff. I don't find it convincing, but nevertheless, he does claim that he's tried to talk with Arrow, and they're not really giving them the time of day. But take that for what it's worth. I mean, this guy seems relatively like a conspiracy theorist. So,
yeah. I can get you that information for credit. Hang on just a second. I just need to pull it up. So,
yeah, no worries. But this guy is well known for he's like the top MH370 video guy. He's all over YouTube, and X right now is blowing up because, again, these are sort of making the rounds now. So you guys are obviously welcome to go check it out and decide for yourselves. But
yeah, it looks like I believe it is Corridor Crew, and it's three video effects artists who look at interesting videos and consider whether they could be produced by, or whether they see evidence of them being produced by video effects. And the answer for this pair of videos was definitely yes.
All right. He says, Arrow ghosted me and are not acknowledging the case I submitted to them. They never even gave my memorandum of record. They know that MH370 videos are real. That's why they ghosted me.
You know what they say, never attribute to malpractice what can be attributed to incompetence. And especially with bureaucracies, if you got thousands of people, if you got thousands of people sending you reports and you don't even have your reporting system set up yet, I wouldn't expect to hear back from them either. Not in any kind of timely manner.
So maybe to wrap things up, as we start to close out the stream today, did this move you on the needle at all? Did it move you toward the belief that ETI is real, that extraterrestrials are real or exist, or did it just not do anything for you?
Well, it did stuff for me in that, like I said, I think the disclosure of the name Immaculate Constellation, I think that's a big deal. And I also think that the report that Immaculate Constellation is discussed in, I think that is significant. Beyond that, it was mostly stuff I knew. When it comes to does extraterrestrial intelligence exist, I am studiously neutral on that. I'm open-minded, but I'm also critical. I'm neither convinced it does exist, nor am I convinced it doesn't exist. If it does exist, I'm not convinced it's here. But I'm open on all that. And I think the question needs to be looked into. And there are UAP out there, and they're being caused by something, and they're violating our airspace around military projects, and we can't match what they're doing. So we need to understand them. And so I'm very much in favor of Arrow and the work it's doing. As the former head of Arrow wrote in an editorial in Scientific American, even after he quit, he said, when it comes to this unexplained aerial phenomena, unexplained is unacceptable. We need to know what this stuff is.
Well, I guess the last point that I'll make as we close things out is I want to acknowledge the role of bias in the conclusions that we draw about this. So someone who is convinced that the existence of extraterrestrials are going to be evidence against Christianity, I think they'd have a reason therefore to be skeptical that these are in fact aliens, and they might therefore adopt some other hypothesis that's going to explain the phenomenon in question, like demons. Or they may just dismiss it altogether and be like, well, this is just psychological, whatever else it is. Or maybe it's just human-generated content. Maybe it's technology that humans have created that we just don't know what it is, and the government hasn't acknowledged it or said anything about it for defense reasons, whatever else. But then on the other hand, people who are open to the existence of aliens and who want them to exist because that would be more beautiful or more valuable or whatever, they're going to, I think, that bias is going to push them in the direction of, well, all of this is confirmation for the existence of extraterrestrials, ETI, NHI. But I wanted to acknowledge that. I think it's important to acknowledge our biases and try our best to put them aside while we're trying to evaluate these questions as objective as possible. It's not possible to completely get rid of all of our bias, but that's what I would encourage you to do if you are still watching this video, is to approach this as objectively as possible. I think I can say that's what Jimmy is doing here, and that's what I'm trying to do, trying to assess the situation as unbiased as possible. Impossible to do 100%, but just wanted to encourage you and the audience and everyone else to be unbiased.
I would agree. Yeah. If it turns out aliens are real or aliens aren't real, it's not going to challenge my faith either way. And in doing all this, that's why I try to be studiously neutral and set aside biases. And I recommend that for everybody.
All right. Well, with that, thank you guys for watching. Let me know, please, what you think about this video in the comments. Did this move you in any way? Did it make you think that ETI is maybe a little bit more probable? Let me know. Let me know what you think in the comments. And with that, see you guys in the next Capturing Christianity videos.
And before we go, just a reminder to do all those great YouTube things. You can help my channel grow by liking, commenting, and sharing the video. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you always get notified when I have a new video. These days, I have multiple videos coming out every week. Thanks so much, and God bless you.